Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. We're just going to take the next minute to let everybody filter in. Give everyone a chance so they don't miss
Hi,
the start.
Lianne.
Brilliant. We've got quite a few attending today, so we'll probably be starting at about 2 minutes past. Maybe 1 minute past. I think 60 seconds is long enough for people to come in, isn't
it? Just about.
Just
It's
about.
being recorded anyway.
Yes. Welcome those who are just joining now. We'll be starting in just a moment. Just letting everybody come in and get settled in before we start. This session is being recorded. Okay.
Perfect.
So, good morning and welcome everybody. This is a lunch and learn session, and normally the people sessions that we run are at 12 o'clock. But today, because of a training obligation that we have, we are doing a brunch and learn. And this is the only one that we're doing, and all of our other sessions will run during lunch, starting at 12. But I'd just like to welcome everybody along to today's People session on imposter syndrome. It really is great to have you with us. Just a quick reminder before we begin, today's session is being recorded, and the replay will be sent out to everybody who has registered. So whether you're here or not, this will be available on the website. We will also email it out to you. And feel free to revisit and share that with any colleagues. Before we dive in, I'd love to take 60 seconds just to let you know about something that can make a huge difference for your team. At Beam, we offer therapeutic coaching designed to support individuals, because when one person grows in confidence or navigates a tricky return to work or settles into a new management role, then the whole team benefits. And these sessions start from £80 plus VAT virtually, or you can have us in and you can have one of us or both of us in for a full day on site to deliver these sessions at £640 plus VAT. If you'd like me to send you any more info after this session, pop a thumbs up in the chat and I'll follow up with you directly. So now let's hand it over to Lianne, who is going to lead us through today's session.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. Really lovely to be here for what Tom just called a brunch and learn. I like that very much. So thank you for joining us live. And for those of you watching it on replay, it's always a pleasure to be here. So this session today is a topic that I have delivered in organizations literally all around the world, for people from all sorts of walks of life, people with 40 years experience in their career and people who are brand new in their career as well. And it's a topic that always has lots of engagement, lots of interest. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand why this topic is so relevant to so many of us. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Obviously, as it's being recorded, I totally understand if you don't want to ask a question live. If you have questions, then we are absolutely here to answer them. And you can do one of two things. You can either pop that question in the chat box and I'll answer it as we get to the end of the session, or at the end of the session, we will stop recording and then we can open up for any questions from the floor as well. So you'll have plenty of chance to ask questions if you want to. Now, even though I deliver on imposter syndrome a lot, and I've spoken on lots of stages about it as well, this is slightly different to any of those other sessions I've delivered because this is specifically for people in people-centric roles. So really how imposter syndrome will impact you if you are someone that is very people focused. And as with all of our people sessions, they always have that lens on it, looking at how we can support those who are supporting everyone else. So we're going to cover quite a bit in our short space of time together. We're going to get a better understanding of what imposter syndrome is. I'm going to explain the term to you. I'm going to explain where it's come from and how you can identify it as well. I'll talk about who's affected by imposter syndrome and why that really is important for people. Then we're going to explore what's known as the different types of imposter. So my version of imposter syndrome may be very, very different to yours, and there's a good reason for that. It doesn't always show up as the same thing for everyone. So you'll get to know and hopefully identify what your type of imposter is. Then I'm going to share with you some really important ways that you can help move beyond imposter syndrome. Now, I want to set expectations before we get started here. There are two schools of thought with imposter syndrome. One school of thought is that you can eradicate it, you can completely overcome it. I don't really subscribe to that, and I'll share with you why as we go through the session. What I'm setting you up for through this session is really how you can unmask your inner imposter, how you can recognize him or her, how you can know when they're calling the shots, and then how you can deal with it. So the way that I teach and work with imposter syndrome is much more about how you see it and how you move forward with it, rather than feeling like you should overcome it altogether. I don't think that's a realistic guideline at all. So when we look at imposter syndrome in people, excuse me, I don't know why it's gone funny, there you go. When we look at imposter syndrome in people, those of you in people-focused roles, it's slightly different because there is a perception that as you're in a people-focused role, you are very visible to the, you can't see any slides, Chrissy. Can everyone else see the slides? Could someone just give thumbs up if you can see the slides? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Chrissy, that might be a leave and come back situation. Yeah, thank you. I don't know why Teams does that sometimes. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so when you're in a people-focused role, you're often very visible. You often have a lot of responsibility. People are often looking at you for what you should do. They expect you to have this sense of calm, this sense of knowing how to handle these really difficult, challenging situations. And that can be even more difficult when you internally feel like a fraud, when you feel like you don't belong, when you feel like you're winging it, when you feel like you're faking it. And I'm not going to ask you here, but if we were in a classroom all together, I would absolutely ask for a show of hands who here has felt like they're a total fraud at some time. And having asked that question in all sorts of rooms, thank you, in all sorts of rooms, what I absolutely know for sure is there are more people who feel like frauds, imposters, like they don't belong, then there are people who are sat there thinking, yep, I completely have it all together. And if you're in a people-focused role where people are looking at you, expecting you to have the answers, expecting you to be calm and composed, then actually that's an ideal breeding ground for those imposter feelings. So let's get a really good understanding of what I mean when I talk about imposter syndrome. Many of you will be aware that this almost feels a bit like a buzzword now. I can't tell you the amount of companies that I work with, and the first conversations we tend to have with those in people roles when they're looking to bring us in is they tend to ask us, what are the hot topics right now? What are other companies booking in? And pretty much every company at some point will talk to us about imposter syndrome being some kind of issue and challenge. So it feels like it's a very present situation at the moment, but it actually isn't a new thing. The term imposter syndrome has been around since 1978. So that's nearly 50 years, quite a while. And it was a term that was coined by two psychologists, researchers called Clance and Imes, who were extremely successful in their roles. They were academically successful, they were professionally successful. And essentially, through conversations with each other, as two females in the 1970s who had achieved great success, one actually revealed to the other one that she didn't feel deserving of that success and she felt like an imposter. And amazingly, the other person didn't say, "Oh, wow, that's awful. You must be a fraud." The other person said, "Me too." And these women who worked a lot with other women in positions of success and achievement started to have these conversations. And they conducted an initial study of around 150 females in 1978 of women who had considerable achievements, but internally they didn't experience an internal feeling of success. And the word that kept coming up over and over again was that they considered themselves to be imposters. And so from that research, Clance and Imes have built a whole career of work on studying this phenomenon. And the term imposter syndrome started to become used as a way of defining it. Now, I think it's really important here, particularly in terms of psychology and therapy, to say first and foremost that imposter syndrome is actually not an accurate term for what is going on. It is not a psychiatric condition. It does not appear in the psychiatric handbook. And so the term syndrome is very misleading. What you may actually see is other places describe it as imposter experience or imposter phenomenon, which is a much more suitable way of describing what's going on. But this term imposter syndrome has become the most common way of describing it. So it's just important to recognize that they're all the same description, and that actually imposter syndrome isn't really a good definition of what is going on. The other thing that is really important is, even though Clance and Imes' initial research was on females, and therefore their research showed that this imposter experience was really common in women who had achieved success, it absolutely is not a female-only condition. This is not something that further research has said is only visible in women. It absolutely is seen in women and men, but there is a higher incidence of it being in women. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail when we look at who's affected. One of the key things that came out of Clance and Imes' research was that they identified 3 key characteristics of imposter syndrome that still stand today. So one is that you think that other people think you're better than you are. Other people have an inflated view of your ability or skills. So maybe you're at work and someone says, "Oh, it's okay, you can handle that, you're great with that." And internally you're thinking, "I'm not, I'm terrible at that." And you almost feel as if you've tricked other people into thinking that you're better than you are. The second is this really quite persistent fear that you're going to be found out or exposed as a fake, that at any moment someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here." This is a really interesting one. I was delivering a workshop on imposter syndrome a couple of years ago, and there happened to be someone on that workshop that the day before had received her PhD. And through conversations through the workshop, she actually said, "Oh, I was awarded my PhD yesterday." And so everyone said, "That's amazing, congratulations." And her face just absolutely dropped. And she said, no, it's not. I haven't told any of my family because I am certain that they've made a mistake. I'm certain that they're going to contact me. The university is going to contact me and say, sorry, this wasn't meant for you. It was meant for someone else. That's that fear that you're a fake, you're a fraud, that other people are going to recognize that. And the third is the persistent attribution of success to something external of yourself. So you accredit your success to luck rather than the hard work you've put in. So people often get really hung up on this idea that I only passed my degree because it was a particularly easy year that year, or I only got that job because a friend of a friend already worked there, and so they put in a good word for me. I only got Employee of the Month because they felt sorry for me, and that's why they awarded it to me. These three defining characteristics of imposter syndrome still stand today, and I am certain that there are people in this room right now who are nodding to every single one of these. You recognize this in yourself. The other thing to state is that as a people person, this is something to be really aware of, understanding in other people around you as well. Those people who, when you say, oh, that was a great job, thanks for doing that, they quickly bat it off and say, oh, well, it was because lots of other people helped, or it was because I just got lucky on finding that key bit of information. It's a key indicator that imposterism is in play. So who is likely to be affected? Well, I guess the good news is that you're not alone if you struggle with imposterism. A recent study suggests that at least 70% of it, 70% of us will suffer from imposter syndrome at some time in our life. For some people, that might be just a period of time. For some people, that might feel like your entire life. So you're in very good company if you feel like an imposter. The other thing to say is that imposter syndrome is far more prevalent the higher up the ladder we go. So we're a lot less likely to feel like an imposter if we're at sort of a shop floor admin level. And the higher up we go through our career, the more likely we are to feel it. Yes, Nicola, that's a really good question. So Nicola asked, can it also be that I don't think I'm as good as other people? Absolutely. Comparison is a huge factor with it. So we look at everyone else and we think everyone else is brilliant. Everyone else deserves a seat at the table. I don't. So absolutely, that is a key part of feeling like an imposter. Now, as I was saying, even the higher up the corporate ladder we go, we're more likely to feel it. And one of the key indicators that ties in lovely with what Nicola just asked, of you feeling like an imposter, is you looking around and feeling like I'm not like these people. So let's say you've got a seat at the executive team table. You start to look around and you consider that they've got more experience, or but they've got all these qualifications, or they had a private school education, or they worked with that company, which is incredible. And we start to compare ourselves to those people and more feel like we don't belong. And that's another key trait within imposter syndrome. I just don't belong with these people. These aren't my people. And so even though anyone can be affected by it, we are more likely to experience it when more and more we start to feel that we are different to everyone else around us. And that can be for so many reasons. Imposterism is really high in academia. So if you think of academia, you are surrounded by excellent people. You're graded and compared against them. You're taught by people who are excellent with a huge breadth of knowledge. And so constantly in academia, and I work with quite a few universities, people feel like they're not as good as their colleagues. We see it in creative industries as well, and that actually includes a lot of tech creativity, which I work quite a bit in as well. Again, when you're surrounded by other people who are pulling together these amazing ideas, they're really creative, you're just in awe of it. And then we're super critical of what we're putting out. High flyers, and I'm certain there are some high flyers in this session right now. Those of you who perhaps have really kind of shot up through the ranks. Maybe you found that you're in a position where you're managing and looking after people who are older than you. Maybe you feel like, oh, everyone else around me has got all this experience and I still feel like I'm new. If you're in a people-centric position where you're responsible for shaping workplace culture, there'll be that feeling of, what if I'm doing it wrong? What if they don't agree with me? First generation professionals, this is definitely one that I hit on. So I am absolutely proud to say that I have an inner imposter. I absolutely will not say that I suffer from imposter syndrome though, and I'll explain that as we go through. But I have absolutely got an inner imposter voice. And a big part of that is through my entire family. I was the first person to go to university. I'm the first female to have had a career, really. I'm the first female to have been an entrepreneur. And so there's all of these firsts that are on my shoulders. And when you explain that to other people, and I've had these conversations, other people think, oh, well, that's brilliant. But internally, I haven't had the teaching to say how to deal with that. Internally, I don't have the role models to say how that should look and how I should do it. And so as a first generation professional, you might feel like, I don't belong here. If you've taken an atypical route through your career, so maybe you didn't go to university, maybe you did your CIPD externally, maybe you are largely qualified by experience, then we start to compare against other people. If you're in any underrepresented group, so DEI professionals often carry a dual burden because you might be representing and advocating for others as well. This is a really interesting point when we go back to that research by Clance and Imes in the 1970s. They found so many females that admitted to being an imposter because in the 1970s, most of the time females were not in those roles. So most of the time there weren't females who were climbing up the ranks through academia, climbing up the ranks through their professional life. And so they were likely to be the odd one out at the table. If you've had high achieving parents, if you were in that position where your parents did amazing things, it may have set you up to feel like, well, I can never measure up. I'll never be able to do what they did. Maybe they've even got a name or a reputation behind them and you kind of think, oh no, they're going to compare me to them and I can't do what they did. We also see it a lot in self-employed or lone workers. And this is something that since the pandemic has definitely amplified imposter syndrome. So in the pandemic, we were all suddenly lone workers, no matter how large the company was that we were working with. And that leaves us alone in our thoughts, the worst place for any of us to be. It leaves us in a situation where we're assuming how well everyone else is coping. We're kind of seeing their highlight reel and we're seeing our behind the scenes situation where we're panicking and we're worrying and we're spinning lots of plates. And so that level of isolation can make people really struggle. So again, the summary of this really is being different in some way. And other people don't need to think that you're different, by the way. This is your own internal representation. You feel that you're different will more than likely lead to imposter thoughts. And the more successful you are, the more likely you are to feel like a fraud. So when we start to look at this, I mentioned at the beginning that your definition and display of imposter syndrome might be different to mine. And there's someone who talks about imposter syndrome a lot, has written a book, Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. Dr. Valerie Young, and she identified that it's accurate that our experience of being an imposter may be different, because she recognizes that there are 5 different types of imposter. And I'm going to whiz you through these and see if you can recognize any of them. What I will say is many people resonate with more than one of these. So you might just think, yep, that one is definitely me. Or you might be there thinking, do you know what? I'm a mix of 3 of them. I can resonate with all of them. So one is the perfectionist imposter. This is where your imposter thoughts are convincing you that you can always do better. It's not good enough. You push yourself. You want it to be better than the last time. If you make the slightest mistake, you're really critical of yourself. You actually sometimes avoid putting work out because you're worried that it's not good enough, and then people will know I'm an imposter. They'll know I'm a fraud. Then we've got the superhero imposter. I should be able to do everything. This level of an imposter likes to excel at every role in their life. They want to be the best parent, the best friend, the best manager, the best colleague. And they spin a lot of plates in doing that. And when they feel like they've let someone else down, then they feel like they've failed. They feel like a fraud. I thought I was a good manager and I've dropped the ball on that. So now I'm a terrible manager across the board. The natural genius imposter is quite interesting. This one comes more from childhood. So if as a child you were naturally gifted at something, you did something, and for you it was effortless, and actually people around you, teachers, parents, celebrated it. Oh, you're brilliant at maths. He's amazing at football. She's brilliant at geography, whatever it is. And internally you were thinking, huh, this is easy. I can do this, and kind of enjoyed getting the feedback. What happened as we got older, if we were a natural genius, was we started to believe that in order for me to be good at anything, it should be effortless. So as soon as I started to learn something that I found really challenging, I found really difficult, all of a sudden I take that as a personal reflection that I must be not very good, rather than recognizing that this is what happens for most people. The soloist imposter must have all of the autonomy. They must do it themselves. So if the soloist imposter gets any help on anything, then they will accredit their success to whatever helped them. So they must do it themselves. They're terrible at asking for help. They're terrible at admitting that they've overcommitted or they need support. And if they feel they have to do that, they see that as a real failure. And then we've got the expert imposter. This imposter is addicted to qualifications. They want to know everything. And any of you who have this imposter know that the more that you learn, the more that you realize you don't know. So it becomes this vicious cycle. Now, to put this into context, my inner imposter is a superhero expert. So I absolutely feel like I should be able to do every role in my life to the best of my ability, and that I should know everything. What that looks like in real life is I often end up pleasing everyone else. I often overcommit, and I often have the tendency to complete lots and lots of qualifications. Now, one thing most people don't talk about when they talk about imposterism is there is a plus side to this. The plus side to having an inner imposter is it will motivate you. There is no way I would have done all the studying that I've done if it wasn't for my expert imposter pushing me. There is no way that I wouldn't work so hard in my relationships if it wasn't for the superhero imposter pushing me. But as with everything, it's a fine line. So this is why I don't think overcoming your imposter, defeating your imposter, is a realistic goal, nor is it a helpful goal. Because what I've learned over the years is that I can befriend my imposter, and I can actually work with my imposter to use it as a sign that helps me recognize when I need to push myself. My inner imposter and neither will yours, by the way, will never show up if I am really comfortable. If I am doing something I've done a million times, my inner imposter is totally silent. My inner imposter only shows up when I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And that's a good thing, because what I've learned to recognize is if my imposter voice pops up, she's telling me that I'm out of my comfort zone, and therefore I can work with it. I can accept that this is a good sign that she's popping up, and I'm going to still do it anyway. I can recognize that most people who are pushing themselves out of their comfort zone are likely to have thoughts like this too. I can normalize it, accept it, and work with it. And in having that approach with my own imposter, I've learned to be able to actually befriend it and use it as a positive thing in my life, which is why I say I have an imposter, but I definitely don't suffer with imposter syndrome. Now, as people, you will be able to recognize imposterism in other people that you're supporting as well. And there are some key behaviors we tend to see when people have imposter syndrome. Research suggests that when someone's struggling with imposter syndrome, they are 60% more likely to put off important projects. Now, just think of that within your team. Things are getting delayed, there's procrastination, there's perfectionism, because people are scared of putting it out there for fear of judgment, for fear of criticism. 50% of people won't speak up with their ideas, which is astounding, because there may be amazing ideas around the table and you're just not getting to hear them because people are scared of voicing them. And that might not just be because of their own inner imposter, that might be because they don't feel safe to voice them. 48% of people write their successes off as luck. Now, the reason this is so negative is because if I believe that I've got because I got lucky, I can't replicate that. So my only chance of reproducing those tools is by somehow people wear the same clothes, people have their lucky pen, their lucky notepad, whatever it is, because I don't believe that my skills were a factor in me achieving something. And also we see that people just turn down golden opportunities, 46% of us. So you perhaps invite a team member to go for an internal promotion and they tell you they don't want to, they're not ready, they don't feel like doing it. Well, the reality is that we're missing out on people doing that. We want people to push themselves out of their comfort zone. So if we consider this, and some of you may already be aware of it, it's definitely a future workshop and one that we deliver a lot in organizations. What you will hopefully start to see as a people person is one of the key requirements to helping people manage their own imposter syndrome is to create psychological safety. Without psychological safety, people will be paranoid that they're a fraud. People will be scared of making a mistake. People will be scared of voicing their ideas and speaking up. So psychological safety is a key representation here for you to put in place and to establish within your organization so people with imposter syndrome can feel safe enough to say that they're struggling with it. So I'm going to share with you some very quick ways to help you move beyond imposter syndrome. So the first is to manage the evidence. When we think something about ourselves, very rarely do we challenge or question it. But just because you think something doesn't make it true. In the therapy room, a phrase that I have said for years and years and years is thoughts aren't facts. Just because I'm thinking it doesn't make it true. So just because I think I'm an imposter doesn't mean I really am. And so I encourage you to manage the evidence. What would your team say about you if you asked them how you impacted them over the last month? What would your team say about you if you asked them how you show up as a manager? That kind of evidence helps you balance that imposter thought with the reality of what's going on. Befriend your inner imposter, as I've already said. Really get to know that inner imposter and make it a way of encouraging you to push yourself. We know that if we're in our comfort zone, no growth happens. If we push a bit outside, we get into the learning zone. It has to be a bit uncomfortable. So see it as a way of identifying I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm absolutely stepping forward. Notice and name it. Now, there is so much research in putting our feelings into words, any feeling. So there's quite a bit of research that has shown that when we label what we're experiencing, our negative experience of it starts to diminish. So a nice bit of research in 2007 by someone called Matthew Lieberman found that the very act of thinking about a feeling and then naming it enabled us to move energy away from our limbic brain, which is our inner chimp, our fight or flight part of the brain, and move energy into our rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, enabled us to think calmly. So the very act of recognizing this is imposter syndrome and naming it, don't have to do it out loud, but sometimes it helps, will enable you to regain control, engage your rational brain, rather than going into that fight or flight. This is really uncomfortable. I want to get away from it. What is also really powerful about noticing and naming it is actually doing that publicly if you feel safe to. So to publicly say to some of your team members, yeah, I struggle with imposter syndrome sometimes. As a leader, what that does is it helps you not only call it out of yourself, but demonstrate to your team that this is a normal experience. This isn't something to be ashamed of. Imposter syndrome's kind of key phrase is you're going to be found out. My way of dealing with that is, well, I'm going to expose myself first so you don't get to have that power over me. So if I tell people, oh, I'm a bit out of my depth here and I feel like an imposter, all of a sudden that voice doesn't have as much power over me anymore. And be compassionate to yourself. Recognize that this is a human feeling. If you can be kind and compassionate to yourself, you will model it to everyone else who's looking up at you. A key component of being kind and compassionate to yourself is recognizing something called common humanity. This experience is normal. This is something that loads of other human beings would experience in this situation. People make mistakes, people feel out of their depth, people feel inadequate. And that's a normal experience, but I'm not going to let it control and dictate how I move forward. The final thing I want to leave you with is really this concept. Every time you are pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, your inner voice of doubt and imposter is likely to show up. Expect it. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It means you're growing. If imposter syndrome is going to thrive in silence, let's keep naming it, talking about it, and proving it wrong. So I want to ask you to reflect on one thing as you go forward. What's one thing you're going to do differently this week if and when your inner imposter shows up? How are you going to treat it differently? Feel free to put it in the chat box if you want to, but it's definitely something I want you to reflect upon. So we've covered a lot in this very short space of time. There are lots and lots of different ways to look at imposter syndrome, but this is the one that seems to work the best for me and all of the people we work with. Remember that you're not alone. It's experienced by more than 70% of us. So the chances are, if you admitted around a table that you sometimes feel like this, most of the room will feel the same. It's not the same for everyone. So there are different types of imposter. So you can explore that with your team. You can have those conversations. And there are countless ways to manage your inner imposter. I've shared with you just a few of the most easy, simple ones. Manage the evidence. If it tells you you're not good enough, ask it why. Find the evidence, and then importantly, find contrary evidence. Befriend it, get to know it. Some people even name it. It's totally fine. Notice and name it. So you're taking control of your brain and not making it force you to live in that fear part of your brain. And be compassionate to yourself. Step into kindness and treat yourself the way that you would treat someone else who was struggling. As I said at the end, I am more than happy to answer questions when we stop the recording. I will hand back over to Tom. Hang on, I've just seen a question. You're not a fraud, you're growing. Is this something experts often say, or is it a conclusion you came to personally? That's a really interesting question. I haven't taken that from someone. It's definitely a phrase that I've used a lot through coaching and therapy. So I can't credit it to someone that I'm aware of. But it's something that from therapy, coaching, and personal experience, often when I feel like a fraud, it's because I'm doing something out of my comfort zone, which means that I'm growing. I'll hand over to Tom for a moment.
Thank you, Lianne. Thank you for this session. I have already put in our next event, which is all about managing boundaries. That is on the 10th of June, and that will be at 12 o'clock. So that will be through lunchtime. So all of the resources will be emailed to you afterwards. They will also be accessible on our internet. If you haven't already, I put in the chat so you can join our People LinkedIn group. That is completely free to join, and we add updates and new events and things that are going on, along with articles that are all relevant to the sessions. And if you need any extra support, or you would like to get us in to support your teams, then you can book a call with either myself or Lianne. Details are on the screen. What I'm going to do is we're going to stop the recording now. So if anybody has any questions, they'll be able to do so without it being recorded.